With my panel, I'm joined now by Tim O'Brien, who's a senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, and Barbara McQuade. She's a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan and an MSNBC legal analyst. Barbara, let's begin with you. In that ruling from the New York judge, he said Attorney General Letitia James has uncovered, quote, copious evidence of possible financial fraud. Given that, how solid does A.G. James's case seem to be here?
Well, Michael, that statement, I think, is based largely on a filing that her office made in January. She was arguing that it was necessary to obtain these depositions, and so she wanted to show her hand a little bit and say, look what I found so far. And she documented in quite a bit of detail the evidence that she has amassed, mostly from documents, but also from witnesses within the Trump organization and from other business entities. And it demonstrated at least 7 instances of what appear to be massive disparities between property valuations. There's an example of one property that was valued at $200 million one year and $400 million the next. We all know that there is the assessment where Trump estimated the size of his Manhattan apartment in Trump Tower as 30,000 square feet, when in fact, objectively, it's 10,000 square feet. And so on its face, she has demonstrated what appears to be just rampant fraud. And what she says is she needs to talk to these folks to see if there's some innocent explanation for all of this. If she can close that, if there's an innocent explanation, she wants to hear it. But based on what we see just on the raw documents, it looks highly suspicious and like a very strong case of fraud.
So to follow up on that, Tim, during that hearing, things got a little bit heated, so much so that the judge and his law clerk had to call repeatedly for a timeout. It was kind of reminiscent of the Super Bowl last week where, you know, it's like, time, take a moment, take a moment. Now, Trump's personal lawyer, Alina Habba, tried to make the argument he was being discriminated against because of his political views. Last time I checked, you know, someone can call me out on this, Republicans weren't a protected class under the law. Was this really the best defense the Trump team could come up with?
Of course it wasn't the best defense, but the Trump team is not top-flight, white-collar criminal defense attorneys here. Habba's background is mainly in real estate law in New Jersey. There's a whole separate book to be written about why Donald Trump chooses the lawyers he does and which ones actually get paid. But at the end of the day, you've seen throughout these proceedings, these various just sort of hollow attempts to drive attention away from the fact pattern. And I thought it was very useful that the judge in this case, in the midst of this food fight started by Trump's attorneys, around the idea of political bias and racial bias at one point, said there is an overwhelming and voluminous stack of facts here. And the fact pattern alone should allow this proceeding to go forward, as it should. I think the New York Attorney General, Tish James, has made injudicious comments in the past if she had wanted to insulate herself from this kind of criticism, but be that as it may, she's assembled a very damning portrait of how the Trumps do business and how the Trump organization operates. The pattern of behavior outlined in these documents is nothing new. This was the substance of litigation I engaged in with Trump when he sued me for a biography. We deposed these same accountants in the course of that litigation. The issue at the center of the litigation was whether or not he inflated the value of his assets, which of course he does, and he's done it rampantly. He's going to be 76 in June. He's been doing this for about at least 50 years. And finally, law enforcement officials have circled around this and have said, well, is this fun and games that Donald Trump and his children engage in not just fun and games, but actually fraudulent? Are they ripping off bankers and investors who have relied on those documents to make loans or invest money? And have they defrauded taxpayers and local governments and the federal government by lowballing the value of those assets? For the first time in Donald Trump's career, these very issues now are in the hands of prosecutors who are well-resourced, aggressive, and they're not going to let them go.
So, hey, Barbara, is that pattern of behavior that Tim refers to that is the subject of 2 investigations going on in New York, one criminal and one civil. Now, if Trump pleads the 5th in this civil investigation, How could that impact the criminal case against him?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, Michael. As you point out, Donald Trump has famously criticized people for invoking the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. But of course, it is a legitimate privilege. All of us have the ability to do that. And if you invoke it in, say, a deposition, it means that the fact that you invoked it can't even be used against you in any subsequent criminal case, because you have a presumption of innocence, no duty to testify, and a jury can't even know that you invoked your right. That is not the case in a civil case. So if there were to be a civil trial and the question came up about what Trump's answer was during his deposition, a jury would be permitted to know that he had invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Now, they don't get an answer to the question, but they can draw an adverse inference from his refusal to answer that it might have been something that was negative about his activities. And so it does have consequences in this instance. We're in those two parallel proceedings, one civil and one criminal.
Well, it is that pressure that's on Donald Trump right now that we're all going to be watching and paying a little bit of attention to, because we know anything that's going to impact his net worth, or at least his perception of his net worth, is going to create great drama for Donald Trump. Tim O'Brien and Barbara McQuaid, thank you both for the conversation.